Meet Tatsu, a man who looks like he could bench press a motorcycle and probably has at some point in his life. His body is basically a walking art gallery of legendary tattoos, each one telling a story that would make most people sleep with their lights on. This guy didn't just climb the Yakuza ladder, he demolished it, single-handedly taking down entire rival families until nobody was left standing in his way. Tatsu was the kind of Yakuza boss that other bosses had nightmares about. But here's where things get interesting. One day, our legendary dragon wakes up and decides he's had enough of the violence, but Tatsu suddenly wants to be a good husband and father. So what does a former crime lord do with his retirement? He becomes a house husband, and we're talking full commitment here. Tatsu now spends his days cleaning house, cooking meals, and basically doing everything that would make Martha Stewart proud. His wife Miku couldn't be more different. She's a workaholic who spends her days in an office, pulling in the family income, while Tatsu handles the domestic front. They've also got Himawari, Tatsu's stepdaughter, who's still navigating the treacherous waters of teenage life. Once they're off to conquer their respective worlds, Tatsu teams up with his buddy Akamiya to collect community contributions around the neighborhood. Now, here's where Tatsu's past creates some interesting complications. His intentions are pure, the money goes towards security posts, community events, and garden maintenance. But when a guy who looks like he could intimidate a brick wall shows up asking for money, people tend to assume the worst. Most residents think they're dealing with loan sharks, not community volunteers. Tatsu's resting face doesn't help matters. One day, while making their usual rounds, they spot a shiny new apartment building. Naturally, they decide to extend their collection route. Inside, they meet the building owner, Kondo, who turns out to be a Yakuza boss himself. When Tatsu politely asks for a 500 yen contribution, basically the cost of a coffee, Kondo laughs and tells them to get lost. But then Tatsu removes his glasses, and suddenly Kondo's whole demeanor changes. Mamma mia! The man practically starts shaking as he hands over the money. Once Tatsu leaves, Kondo immediately briefs his men about who they just encountered. Turns out, these two had met before at a year-end Yakuza gathering. Kondo had been his usual arrogant self, telling Tatsu to move, but then slipped on the floor that Tatsu was cleaning and smacked his head. Instead of apologizing, Tatsu scolded him and even challenged him to a fight. That's when Kondo realized he wasn't dealing with some random janitor. Now, discovering that the legendary Immortal Dragon lives in his neighborhood, Kondo's mind immediately goes to revenge. He orders his men to beef up security, because apparently some people never learn their lessons. Meanwhile, Akamiya pays a visit to their local boss, Eguchi, to report the new Yakuza presence in their territory. Eguchi has his own interesting situation going on. He's married to Habari, who's also in the Yakuza, but due to the struggling economy, they're both working part-time at a convenience store. Back at the Tatsu household, the family faces a crisis that hits close to home, literally. Their pet hamster needs a new home, and they can't bear the thought of just releasing it into the wild. So they decide to find someone willing to adopt their furry friend. This is where things get absurd. While Tatsu is out looking for potential hamster parents, a police officer spots him and assumes he's carrying a weapon. Tatsu, desperate to keep his adorable secret safe, ducks into Kondo's building to avoid the cops. Kondo's men see Tatsu entering their building and immediately assume he's there to launch an attack. What follows is a classic case of mistaken intentions turning into an actual confrontation. Thanks to his years of experience, Tatsu manages to take down all of Kondo's men. When he's finally cornered with nowhere to run, Tatsu pulls out his secret weapon, the hamster. The officers mistake it for a gun at first, but once they realize what's actually happening, one of them volunteers to adopt the little guy. That evening, Miku notices her husband looks exhausted and decides to cook dinner for once. Here's the thing about Miku, she's clearly brilliant at her job, but cooking isn't exactly her forte. The meal turns out to be spectacularly tasteless, but they eat it anyway because that's what married couples do. Over dinner, they discuss potential vacation spots for the upcoming summer. But Tatsu, being a former Yakuza, can't help but think about all the things that could go wrong. His mind immediately goes to worst-case scenarios, and he ends up shooting down their vacation plans entirely. Later that night, Himawari hears someone shouting outside their house. When she investigates, she finds a young boy who appears to have been abandoned. They call the police and try to help locate the child's parents, but in the meantime they need supplies. That night, Iguchi and his wife come over to congratulate the happy couple. To avoid any further misunderstandings, Tatsu and Miku explain the real situation. Everyone agrees to help care for the child until his parents are found, and they decide to name him Ryu. Having Ryu around transforms Tatsu in ways that are both touching and amusing. The former crime boss becomes noticeably more cheerful, like he's discovered a part of himself he never knew existed. He even tries to find playmates for Ryu, but his intimidating appearance sends other parents fleeing from the playground with their children in tow. Still, Tatsu is determined to give Ryu the happy childhood he never had. The peaceful domestic life gets interrupted when Tatsu receives a call about Kondo's men causing trouble at an old school. They're trying to pressure a teacher into signing some kind of document against her will, despite her gentle appearance. This teacher has some serious backbone and shuts down the thugs with fierce words. When Tatsu arrives on the scene, Kondo's men take one look at him and decide they have urgent business elsewhere. The teacher explains that Kondo wants to buy the school building and turn it into a supermarket. After being turned down, the school has been facing threats and violence, causing many students to withdraw. A concerned mother approaches Tatsu and asks for his help, begging him to use his influence to protect the school. Later at home, Tatsu and Miku have a lengthy discussion about the situation. Miku eventually agrees to let him help, but with one crucial condition: he has to solve the problem without resorting to violence. Tatsu decides to call in his old friend Shirakawa, another former Yakuza who has experience working as a school security guard. Even their casual conversations involve flexing muscles and sound more like arguments than discussions, because old habits die hard. While they're talking, a woman named Koharu suddenly appears. She's Shirakawa's sister. Thinking the two men are fighting, she intervenes and tries to strike Tatsu. Instead of being intimidated, Koharu immediately falls for Tatsu because of his handsome appearance, because apparently some people are attracted to danger. Back home, Akamiya and Miku are having their own conversation, and it takes a concerning turn. Akamiya starts expressing suspicions that Ryu looks remarkably similar to Tatsu, wondering if the child might be the result of an affair. Miku is so taken aback by this accusation that she slaps Akamiya out of frustration. The next day, Tatsu and Akamiya brainstorm ways to promote the school. They settle on making a promotional video, but instead of creating something informative, they end up with what looks like an action movie trailer. They don't give up, though, and start handing out flyers on the street. Unfortunately, Tatsu's intimidating appearance means they look more like thugs trying to extort people than community volunteers trying to help a school. After seeing their video, Koharu decides to apply as a teacher at the school. Her real motivation is getting closer to Tatsu, but she plays it off as professional interest. She immediately bonds with Ryu, the school's first student. When Akamiya sees how close Ryu and Koharu are, his suspicions go into overdrive. He calls Miku to share his concerns, which plants seeds of doubt in her mind. She starts believing that Ryu might be the child of Tatsu and Koharu's relationship. Driven by these doubts, Miku decides to attend the upcoming sports festival at the school. She needs to see this situation for herself. The next day brings an unexpected twist. Another group of Yakuza visits the school, and Tatsu immediately goes into alert mode, ready for a fight. But instead of causing trouble, they want to enroll the Yakuza boss's grandson in the school. Since Tatsu is well known in the local Yakuza community, they entrust him with the care of the boss's grandson. The school now has its second student, and business is officially picking up. Later that day, Miku, curious about Koharu, decides to visit the school and meet her in person. With just a bit of attitude, she introduces herself and makes sure to mention that Tatsu is her husband. The sports festival takes place with only 2 students participating. Kondo, meanwhile, is growing increasingly angry about the school's continued operation. He decides to pay a visit with his men, expecting to intimidate everyone into submission. He's confident that Tatsu will recognize him and be appropriately concerned. Instead, Tatsu fails to remember him at all, which is probably the most devastating thing that could happen to Kondo. Just as he's about to approach Tatsu, Koharu suddenly steps in and punches Kondo in the face. The incident results in threats of revenge before Kondo storms off with his men. Nothing bruises a villain's ego quite like being forgotten by their nemesis and then punched by a schoolteacher. As time passes, more children start enrolling in the school. It's clear that what was once on the brink of shutting down has flourished thanks to Tatsu's guidance and protection. Tatsu feels genuine gratitude and happiness, finding in the school the warmth of family he once lost. Seeing the genuine joy on her husband's face, Miku can't help but feel happy herself. One morning, still troubled by her doubts, Miku decides to have a private conversation with Koharu. She can't shake the thought that Ryu is Tatsu's child with Koharu. After Koharu's explanation, however, Miku realizes she was completely wrong and feels embarrassed about her assumptions. The peaceful resolution gets shattered when a truck crashes into the school's fence, followed by a black van that kidnaps both Himawari and Ryu. Akamiya tries to protect them, but gets knocked unconscious and falls onto the road. Tatsu and the others immediately chase after the van. When Tatsu sees the gap between vehicles, he makes a split-second decision and jumps onto the kidnapper's car to save his children. Shirakawa joins the chase, and after a lengthy pursuit, they manage to stop the kidnappers and rescue both Himawari and Ryu. Later, they visit Akamiya in the hospital, where he remains unconscious due to serious head injuries. Filled with sorrow and suspicion, Tatsu becomes convinced that Kondo is behind the kidnapping. This suspicion fuels a growing need for revenge, and seeing Tatsu's determination, Shirakawa immediately decides to stand by his side. It's like watching a flashback to their old days, two former Yakuza, their bodies covered in legendary tattoos, preparing to show their strength once again. When they arrive at Kondo's location, he greets them with his men standing ready. Shirakawa issues a challenge, and an imminent battle is about to unfold. Good news arrives when Akamiya finally wakes up from his coma. Once he's discharged from the hospital, he wastes no time joining Tatsu for the upcoming battle. Tatsu's group can be seen carefully selecting weapons and acquiring large amounts of gunpowder from their various contacts. Their extensive preparations become the talk of the town, with locals wondering just how fierce the battle between the two Yakuza groups will be. When Kondo hears about these preparations, he realizes the scale of what they're getting ready for. Suddenly, the elderly Yakuza boss who earlier sent his grandson to the school appears at Kondo's place. He joins forces with Kondo, claiming he wants revenge on Tatsu for their past conflict. Kondo welcomes the extra support with open arms. After several days, the time for battle finally arrives. Tatsu says goodbye to Miku, who anxiously hopes for his safe return. Kondo's group, all dressed in black suits, marches toward the battle site with serious determination. Suddenly, an explosion goes off, shocking everyone. They think it's gunshots, but it turns out to be fireworks set off by Tatsu's group. Instead of encountering enemy forces on the battlefield, they're greeted by a lively crowd celebrating a festival. At the same time, the Yakuza boss who joined forces with Kondo reveals that he's actually an undercover agent. His true goal was to collect evidence of Kondo's illegal activities so the police could finally arrest him. The police on the scene give the signal to arrest Kondo and his men. Fueled by anger from the betrayal and realizing there's no other option left, Kondo initiates the fight anyway. Although their numbers are small, Tatsu's group succeeds in defeating all of Kondo's men. Tatsu faces off with Kondo in the final confrontation, and given that Kondo is up against a legendary Yakuza boss, it's no surprise that he's defeated and tied up along with his men. For the last time, Kondo reveals a crucial truth. He's not the one who kidnapped the children. The police confirm this, explaining that the real culprits are the same two men who grabbed the children and loaded them into the black van, and they're also the ones who left Ryu in front of Tatsu's house, planning to come back for him after things cooled down. After a lengthy interrogation, the police finally locate the child's real parents. Tatsu and Miku make the difficult decision to return Ryu to his family. Although it saddens them deeply, they know it's the right thing to do. Miku takes time to express her gratitude to Ryu for being part of their family, even briefly. And while it's hard to say goodbye, they're determined to live fully in the days to come. If you've made it this far without smashing that subscribe button, congrats. You officially have more self-control than I do at a buffet. But seriously, hit subscribe. I waste my life watching movies so you don't have to. It's the least you could do.